Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brianna and this is 4 Paws in a Book. I make book and lifestyle related content, so if that's something that you're interested in, make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. Today I'm going to be talking to you all about the books that I read in the month of August. In August, I had this crazy goal of trying to read 33 books in 31 days. It's because I was turning 33 in August. There was a whole thing, okay? I didn't get there. I did get close. I had the best reading month I've ever had, but I didn't quite get there. I got to 25 books, which is still phenomenal. Of those 25, 23 of them are either coming off of my TBR number or they were books that were hauled this month, so they won't be added on to this number. So that's good. I had one reread and then one ebook. Other than that, everything else was a book that I owned. So I'm still counting it as a win, even though we didn't quite get to 33. I definitely hit a wall towards the later end of the month and didn't want to read as much. Which is fine. That happens. It just wasn't conducive to the project that I was trying to do. I did do a mid-month wrap-up, so if you would like to see my in-depth thoughts about the books that I read in the first half of the month, go ahead and check that out up there. I'm not going to be talking about them in depth here because there's a lot of books to talk about. If you're familiar with how I do my wrap-ups, I will do a mid-month wrap-up where I talk about the books in chronological order through the middle of the month, and then at the end of the month, that's when I do my stats, talk about goals, things like that, and then I will talk about the books from the book that I liked the least to the book that I liked the most. So with that being said, let's talk about some stats. I did say 25. 2 of those books I DNF'd, so I finished 23 books. That is a total page count of 7,609 pages. I've never been anywhere close. I think previously my record was like 6,000, so this is an insane number of pages, an insane number of books that I read. Do I foresee this happening again next month? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We're going to take it slow this month. For genres, I read 5 contemporaries, 1 dystopian, 4 fantasies, 3 graphic novels, 1 horror, 7 romance, and 2 sci-fi. A lot of that comes from Rom-Comathon because we were doing a week of romance books. And also, those are just very conducive to reading quickly. You can finish a romance audiobook in a day easily. So that's why I read a lot of romance books. I did read 14 books on audio, 1 ebook, and 8 books physically. I read 18 books targeted at an adult audience, 2 at a middle grade audience, and 3 at a YA audience. For the authors, I had 5 debut authors that I read, 11 authors that I had read before, and 7 authors that were new to me. And then let's talk about star rating. My average rating was a 3.54, which I'm calling a win. Anything over a 3.5 at this point, we're calling it a win. I've been very harsh on my ratings this year, which is not a bad thing. I'm just finding what I actually really like in books, and I'm critiquing them, which is what I'm supposed to be doing as a reviewer, and I'm not giving you an honest review if I'm giving, books 4 and 5 stars when I really didn't actually like them that much. So I am being pretty harsh with my reviews this year, and you can see that reflected in my average scores over the year, or my average rating over the year. I did DNF 2 books, like I said. I gave 1 book 1.5 stars, 3 books 2 stars, 1 book 2.5 stars, 3 books 3 stars, 4 books 3.5 stars, 5 books 4 stars, 3 books 4.5 stars, and 3 5-star reads, which that was exciting. Okay, now that we have the stats out of the way, let's talk about the books. I DNF'd 2 books this month, like I said. The first one was The Butterfly Garden, and I did talk about this one in my mid-month wrap-up. And then the second one was Set on You by Amy Leah. I did talk about this one in my Rom-Comathon vlog. I only let this one go about 3 chapters until the love interest said that he had a dog named Albus Doodledore, and we're not here for that in 2022. No thank you. Also, as a doodle breeder, just know, we're not here for that. So, this one's going away. It's on Pango if you want it. My 1.5 star rating, I feel, is probably a little bit harsh, but I don't care. We're just gonna go with it. It's In the Quick by Kate Hope Day. I did use my, like, modified caw pile on it, and this is where it ended up. This is essentially like a Jane Eyre retelling in space, but honestly, it was just so boring. It was so mundane. It was pointless. Really? I mean, it was supposed to be this girl who goes into space, and more often than not, we're talking about, like, being at the school that she's at, training for this, and, like, there's so many scenes about what she eats. And not, like, in the cool astronaut way, but, like, no, like, on Earth. And then there's, like, this scene where she's, like, literally brushing her teeth. And not, like, in a cool, interesting way because she's on a spaceship. No, just brushing her teeth. And so it just felt pointless, right? This is definitely a cover buy. Like, I'm very upset about that because this cover is so pretty, and honestly, that's the best thing about this book. It was so boring. So boring. Also, you have to listen to it on audio because she doesn't use quotation marks in her, like, for any of her dialogue, and that's just annoying. I had 3 2-star reads this month, 2 of which I talked about in my mid-month wrap-up. The first one was Vladimir by Julia May Jones. Rich white people problems. That's this book. I also read Anya's Ghost by Vera Braskal. This is a graphic novel that deals very poorly with body image, body dysmorphia, and, like, just a lot of girl-on-girl hate. We weren't here for this. I also read The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager, and I gave this one 2 stars. This is about a woman who was a famous, like, Broadway actor or opera, I don't know, some sort of actor, and she is going to her family's cabin on the lake, which really should have been a pond, but, you know, it is what it is. And it's kind of like this whole woman in the window vibes, where she's, like, looking at her neighbor and spying on her neighbor, and they're, you know, assuming that they're doing very nefarious things. There's a lot of red herrings in this that aren't red herrings. It's really hard to talk about this book without being spoilery, but basically way too much happened in it, and also we got weirdly paranormal. I think if you liked Sarah Penborough, was it Behind Her Eyes? I think if you liked that and, like, how that ended, then you might like this book. But for me, it was so out of left field that I just couldn't get behind it. So this was a big miss for me. It's the worst Riley Sager book that I've read. I haven't read Survive the Night, so we'll see about that one. But yeah, I was like, I had lower expectations of this one just because, like, I had heard some of things, but I think that this had the potential to do a lot, and it fell short. And, yeah. I also really hated all of the characters and really couldn't have cared less what actually happened to them. So there's also that. Also, like, why do all of our unreliable narrators just have to be alcoholics? I don't know. Aren't we done with that trope? Can we move past that? So, 2 stars. Very disappointed in this one. I had 1 and 2.5 star book this month, and that was My Killer Vacation by Tessa Bailey. I read this for Rom-Comathon. This was the group book, and I mean, it's a very quick read, but it's kind of like this romance meets murder mystery, and I don't think that she did either of them well. I also think that it was not insta love. Well, kind of insta love. Definitely insta lust. But then, like, they do have sex, and all of a sudden he's thinking about her being pregnant. And that was a little bit weird. There were some funny parts in this. I mean, they do have sex in a church, which I thought was just fantastic. And there were some funny parts, but, like, I didn't care about either one of the characters. I think that the female Taylor was just kind of like a naive, dumb bitch. And he was just annoying and wouldn't stop talking about how much he had a heartburn. So, like, dude, take some Tums. Overall, definitely not what I've come to expect from Tessa Bailey. Definitely not as good as It Happened One Summer or Hook, Line, and Sinker. This is indie published. It's not from the same publishing house as her, like, more obviously traditionally published ones. And I'm curious as to, like, that different process. Like, was there a different editor? Was there an editor? I don't know. I just don't think she did anything like particularly well, any one thing, right? Like it wasn't a great murder mystery and it wasn't a great romance. It was just kind of meh on both fronts. I had 3-star reads, 2 of which I did talk about in my mid-month wrap-up. The first one was A Mirror Mended. This is the sequel to A Spindle Splinter. This is one of the first books that I read in the month. I also read If It Makes You Happy by Claire Kahn. This is a YA kind of summer contemporary romance, and I had quite a bit to say about it, so I'll let you check that out. And then I also read Fumbled by Alexa Martin. I read this during Rom-Comathon. This is the second book in the Playbook series, and it follows TK Moore, the wide receiver of the Denver Stallions or something like that. I don't know. It's supposed to be the Denver Broncos. And he had a high school girlfriend that she got pregnant at 16 and ended up disappearing, right? It was a miscommunication thing in the fact that she thought he wasn't, she thought he was ignoring him because she got pregnant. He did not get the message that she was pregnant. It was a whole thing, right? So she has just been living her life for the last 9 or 10 years with this kid. And then TK comes back into the picture and there's a second chance romance. I wanted more football from this. I think that she was only at 1 game, and I really liked Intercepted because there was a lot of more football game stuff, right? And also second chance romances are generally one of my least favorite tropes, unless they're done really well, and I don't think that this one was. It was kind of like this, the first time they meet after 10 years apart, right? She's just instant mush. She cannot function without him. She cannot have a single individual thought without him. And I was honestly, I don't know that I would even recognize my exes from high school, let alone not be able to form single coherent thoughts after a decade of not seeing them. Especially if, you really thought that he just ignored you because you got pregnant. So I don't know. The whole reintroduction of the two of them just didn't make a whole lot of sense. And so from the very beginning, I didn't believe the story. I didn't believe the romance. So 3 stars. It was fine. I'll still finish out the series. But it wasn't my favorite. I had 4 3.5-star reads, and I actually talked about all of them in my mid-month wrap-up. I feel as the beginning of the month definitely had better books than the end of the month. So I read Amina's Voice by Helena Kahn. This is a middle grade contemporary. It was really cute, very diverse. Definitely recommend if you have a middle school library or middle school kids. This is a great book for you. I read Luster by Raven Lalani. This one is just a case of me not being a literary fiction reader and not understanding the genre. I think that a lot of people would really like this book. And then a couple of romances. The Roughest Draft by Emily Wibberley and Austin Sigmund Broca. This had a lot of funny parts, and I really liked the kind of montage of writing a book together, especially when you're kind of on the outs with somebody. But I wanted more tension between the two of them, right? I wanted to know why things were happening, and I wanted to see more of that. And then also One to Watch by Kate Stamen London. This one I actually had very, very low expectations going into it, but I actually really ended up liking it. I just wish that the ending would have been different, because honestly, they just all needed to go to therapy. I had 5 4-star reads, and I talked about 3 of them in my mid-month wrap-up. That was Queen Takes Rose by Katie Robert. This is the last book in the Wicked Villain series. A Spindle Splintered by Alex C. Harrow. This was one of my rereads of the month, and the first book before A Mirror Mended. I wanted to reread that before reading that one, and I enjoyed it the same. And then also A Magic Steeped in Poison by Judy Eileen. This is a YA fantasy with a tea-based magic system. The other 2 4-star reads that I did not talk about, the first one being Thank You for Listening by Julia Whelan. I did talk about this one in my Rom-Comathon vlog. This is about an audiobook narrator who normally does her own audiobook. She doesn't work with another narrator. But for this romance, they are working together. And so she's working with this big romance narrator. They never actually meet. They're on opposite sides of the country, but they correspond back and forth between emails. And the emails are hilarious. They're really funny banter. They're a little flirty, a little sexy. And you just kind of see this relationship start to build via email. Swanee, the main character, was an actor prior to audiobook narrating, and she actually was in a really tragic accident, and that's why she moved into narration. And it's it's a book about, like, finding yourself and figuring out who you are, but then also this really cute, like, just soft romance alongside it. And I had a lot of fun with it. Obviously, Julia Whelan is a pretty famous audiobook narrator. She does things like a lot of, like, lit fic or women's fiction. She narrated The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And so she's definitely one of my favorite narrators. And so being able to kind of read her own story was kind of cool. Okay, and then lastly, the book that took me literally a month to read. And that is The Kingdom of Copper by Essie Shakapuri. This is the second book in the Daemon trilogy. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I still really love the series. Like, please don't get me wrong. I don't think this was as good as City of Brass. I think the City of Brass was better. I think that this one suffered a little bit from middle book syndrome, just because I think some of the pacing in the middle was a little bit off. I absolutely love this world. This world building is phenomenal. This author can write and develop a world. Like, just trust me on that. The characters are fantastic. I did want a little bit more from Ollie and Nari. I think that like, they are separated for the majority of the book, but those are the two characters that, like, you really want to, like, you know, be working together, and so they're apart for so long, and so there's a little bit, like, of this, I don't know, tension where you're just like, I want these two people to be together, not like together, but you know what I mean. Like, I just need you to work together until the very end. It's like the very end of the book where they finally get together. This is probably a me thing, but there was a time gap between City of Brass and Kingdom of Copper, and I felt like the characters didn't grow at all, like, from one book to the next. Or at least, like, you know, from the end of City of Brass to the beginning of Kingdom of Copper. They didn't grow at all. They were, like, basically the same static character. They grew within the book, but not on their own, if that makes any sense. So that was just, like, a little thing for me. Definitely will be reading Empire of Gold. Really excited to pick that one up, despite it being, like, very large. But that's okay. I am really glad that I got this one done. I only ended up tabbing the first half of it. I was reading this physically, but then my audio hold came in from the library towards the second half of the month, and I just finished it on audio. So I will have to, like, go back and re-tab things, I guess. I don't know. Okay, and then I had 3 4.5 star reads, and I talked about all 3 of them. The first one is The Romance Recipe by Ruby Barrett. This is a cooking-inspired sapphic romance, and, like, I'm here for that, right? This is just me. I really enjoyed this one, especially as a debut. Okay, and then I also read Volume 1 and Volume 2 of Lore Olympus. I gave these 4.5 stars. Really, really enjoyed these. Cannot wait for Volume 3 to come out. Okay, and then I had 3 5-star reads. One was a reread, and then one of them I did talk about in my mid-month wrap-up. However, I think that 2 of these 3, the 2 that are not rereads, will probably end up in my best books of the year. So at least we ended on a high note. So the one that I already talked about was The Measure by Nikki Ehrlich. I cannot stop talking about this book. I have recommended this book to so many people. Like, in my real life. I think that this is a book that, like, even if you don't read a lot, you will get something out of this. I don't really want to compare this book to, like, if you liked The Midnight Library, you would like this book. I do think that The Midnight Library is a little bit more direct, a little bit more hit you over the top of your head with its messaging. This is a little bit more subtle, just more in its sense of, like, being a psychological and sociological experiment. But there are a lot of, like, human lessons to be learned in this book, and I really, really enjoyed it. I like those type of books, though. So I'm hesitant to say if you like The Midnight Library, you might like this book, but I do kind of see the same vibes there. Okay, and then my reread was The Darkness Outside Us by Elliot Schaffer. This was one of my best books of 2021. This is a young adult sci-fi romance about these 2 people from, like, opposing countries. It's kind of obvious that it's supposed to be the US and Russia, or just kind of Europe in general. And they have to work together. They're on this spaceship, and it's really fun. It's kind of a Bucky Sam dynamic here. If you've watched The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it's very much like that. And this is the kind of book that kind of, like, breaks your heart and then puts it all back together. So, we will be talking about this one on the Avengers live show. I'm not sure when that's going to be. I have a very busy September amongst the hosts, so we have to still plan a date for that. But once we schedule that, then we will be talking about this book in depth, because it was the group book for the Avengers Reading Challenge. And then lastly, my favorite book of the month was Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring Blake. This is the sequel to Delilah Green Doesn't Care, which I haven't stopped talking about all year long. And this is a sequel. It comes out in November. I loved this book. I do think that there might be some people that won't like this book as much as Delilah. Honestly, I think this is going to be very much like the Brown Sisters, where everyone has a favorite sister or a favorite main character and a favorite book. And they're all different, right? They all love all of the books, but they're all going to have a different favorite character. I love Astrid. I think she became so relatable in this book. She kind of has this bisexual awakening at 26, 27 years old, which, like, can relate. Essentially, Astrid is Delilah's stepsister, and she gets this job. She's an interior designer. She gets a job designing an inn that's going to be on kind of like an HGTV show. And as part of that project, or the owner's granddaughter, is Jordan, who is this like lesbian carpenter. She's adorable. She has tarot cards. She like does readings every day. These two are just perfect. Honestly. Anyways, it's kind of a rivals to lovers. They kind of have this introduction at the beginning and they kind of hit it off wrong. And I wouldn't call it a hate to love romance, but it's definitely like a rivals to lovers, kind of like, oh my God, you're so annoying, but also cute. So really, really love these two. I think their dynamic is fantastic. And it comes out in November and you should definitely check it out. Those are the 25 books that I read or DNF'd in the month of August. Like I said, September is not going to be that crazy at all. But I'm really glad to have, at least put a dent into my physical TBR, especially because I hauled so many books this month. And my book haul is coming out soon, so you'll be able to check that out as well. But I couldn't imagine having not read as much as I had, or I did this month, and then hauling as many books as I did in the month of August. That number would be really high. It's already high, but it would be really high. Let me know down below what your favorite book of the month of August was, and if you're not feeling chatty, put an apple emoji, because why not? That is all I have for you today. If you are new here and you have not yet subscribed, there's a little red button that you can do so down below the video. If you'd like to hang out with me more, I have a Patreon where you can click that link down below. We have a private Discord channel and other exclusive perks. And also the links to my Instagram, Goodreads, and Twitter are down below as well if you'd like to hang out with me there. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.